Good evening and welcome to this presentation about religion in schools. I appreciate you allowing me to present to the board this evening, and I hope that we can come to some conclusions. So with the new updates to the current administration's beliefs on religion in schools, let's revisit the laws, regulations, and current standings for religion in schools before we get started. Some current laws. We have Section 8524A of the ESA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. It requires the Secretary to issue guidance to state educational agencies and local educational agencies and the public on constitutionally protected prayer in public elementary and secondary schools. This allows for students to participate in prayer as long as it is not required by the school system. In addition to Section 8524B requires that, as a condition of receiving funds from the government, the local education agency must certify in writing to its SEA that it has no policy that prevents or otherwise denies participation in constitutionally protected prayer in public schools. This was recently updated, and this means that schools cannot deny or prevent students from participating in prayer as it is protected by the federal government law. There is not to be school-sponsored prayer or religious acts within the school. However, freedom to pray or participate in religious acts on school grounds is acceptable. This means that students can form groups and pray. They can pray on their own. Teachers can pray. Any staff members can pray. The stipulations are that it cannot be school-sponsored and it cannot be forced upon or required. Groups cannot require students or participants to prayer before or after games or during different activities that are school-sponsored, but they are free to do so on their own if they choose. Court cases that led to these current standings. So we have Cantwell versus Connecticut and Everson versus Board. These were within 7 years of each other. The Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment's Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause applied to the states. Previously, it only applied to government agencies. These two clauses say that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Basically, this states that those within the schools are free to practice for their religion as they so choose, such as stated by the First Amendment, and that the Congress shall not make a law interfering with this right. Engel versus Vitale, the Supreme Court held that the Establishment Clause prohibited the recitation of a school-sponsored prayer in public schools. This is again saying that school-sponsored prayer is not allowed, but that others can do it on their own. In Stone versus Graham, this was in 1980, the Supreme Court found unconstitutional a Kentucky law requiring all public schools to post a copy of the Ten Commandments. This interferes with that First Amendment. And then in Wallace versus Jaffrey in 1985, it overturned an Alabama law requiring public schools to set aside a moment each day for silent prayer or meditation. This also interferes with the First Amendment. It requires the Ten Commandments, which is a piece of religion, to be posted, which does not follow the First Amendment. And in the second case, we have a school that required a moment set aside for silent prayer. And again, this interferes with the First Amendment as this is school-sponsored prayer and it is required in that piece. The Supreme Court ruled in Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe in 2000 that schools may not sponsor student-recited prayer in high school football games. This is one of the most recent cases that I chose for this presentation because it's important and it's one of the most recent, so it's pretty applicable. There are a lot of schools that do pray before and or after football games, as long as it is not sponsored by the school and as long as it is not required, they are free to do so as they choose. So let's look at our current government administration beliefs. President Trump defended students recently who feel that they can't pray in their schools. And he also warned school administrators that they risk losing federal funds if they violate their students' rights to religious expression. As previously stated, students are allowed to pray on their own freely, as long as it is not school-sponsored. If schools interfere with the students' freedom to pray in school, then they do risk losing federal funds as they are not following these rules and regulations. While the U.S. Supreme Court banned school-sponsored prayer in public schools in 1962, students are allowed to meet and pray on school grounds as long as they do so privately and don't try to force others to do the same. Privately does not mean out of sight or out of view from other people. It just means that the students are not requiring others to do so and that they are choosing to do it. The school is not forcing it upon them. Trump recently said that the government must never stand between the people and God, and I think this speaks a lot for what our current administration has for their views on religion in schools. While we still follow these laws and regulations, this statement can also just mean that we allow those students to pray and participate in religious acts at school. While changes to existing laws were not proposed by the president, the White House wants to empower students and teachers to exercise their rights. The Trump administration is taking 3 actions to support the free exercise of religion, one being the updated guidelines previously stated, saying that schools must allow students to participate in prayer in school as long as it is not school-sponsored. And here are my references. I encourage you to look at these and review them for yourself. And I hope this presentation helped our school district become more prepared in the future. Thank you.